So it's been a while since I've recorded a video. All my recent videos are actually pre-recorded and over 2 months old. I just kind of batch recorded and had them all sitting there and had people editing them because I haven't really wanted to make any videos, and I've also been on the job hunt. I wanted to make an update video for anyone who might be interested and currently looking for a dev job. There's so much doom and gloom out there on the internet and on Reddit and on YouTube about it being the worst job market in history for developers. And I just wanted to talk about my positive experience in getting my most recent job and honestly kind of landing my dream job. After a year of doing YouTube full time and trying to give up the rat race and live off of internet money, it was starting to get a little bit difficult. Things were starting to get expensive and I was starting to burn through savings. So I decided to start looking for a job. Of course, when I did that, I saw all the bad news. I saw all the stuff that was on Reddit. I'm on there frequently and I see all the posts of people talking about how bad everything is. So naturally that made me freak out. And what's funny is that a few months back, I was having a conversation with my buddy Kenny Gunderman, who also does YouTube and is a software developer. And he was kind of sharing his experience with looking for a job recently because he saw me post a few things asking is the job market really as bad as everyone says it is? And he wanted to share his experience with me personally and tell me that he had recently started applying for a new job and went through the whole process. And it was actually fairly easy for him to get a job, although he saw all the same things I was seeing on the internet about how bad things were in the job market. So I do want to start off by saying I do have 7 years of professional experience. So I'm not a junior developer. I'm definitely mid to senior level. And I know that that plays a big part in being a more ideal candidate. But I will say that I feel I have a weak resume. I have quite a few gaps in my resume. I have a few jobs where it seemed like I job hopped. I have 6 months of experience at one job and then 3 months at another job that was contracting work, and then a year off because I went traveling, and then another year off recently because I was doing YouTube and went traveling again with my family. And overall, if I was someone who was looking at my resume as a potential candidate, I would say that I'd be a little bit concerned about the gaps in my experience and also the fact that I kind of job hopped. And another thing that I felt was something that kind of hurts my resume is that a lot of my experience is in a tech called Adobe Experience Manager, AEM, and I have about 2 years or so of professional experience, actually 2.5 years of professional experience in that tech. And it's this niche CMS built by Adobe, and it's used by Fortune 500 companies. And it's kind of just not something that is highly sought after from a development perspective, unless you're specifically looking for that tech stack. Most companies or most software engineers or people who are hiring for developers don't really even know what it is unless you've worked with it. So that's another thing that felt wasn't great on my resume. And my last job was also more of a designer role, which funny enough kind of ended up helping me get my most recent job. Even though I'm a full stack developer at this new job that I'm working, it played a big role in helping me get that job because of the fact that I have some design experience and I've done mostly front-end development. But I just wanted to touch on my resume a little bit because I know that a lot of people often worry about things like that when they're applying for jobs and worry about what their resume looks like when they're trying to apply for jobs. Another thing too is I was specifically applying for jobs in a tech stack that I've never worked in professionally. I wanted to make sure that I got a job working in Laravel, and I particularly wanted to work in Laravel with Inertia and Vue.js. I have experience with Angular. I have some experience with React. I've never worked in Vue.js professionally, and I've never worked in Laravel professionally. But I did have experience working with Model View Controller, and I have enough experience to where I felt that I could still pick up a new tech stack. And I also built a couple really big personal projects that I was kind of trying to build as SaaS products in Laravel, but I wasn't using Inertia or Vue. I was using Livewire, but I was still working in Laravel enough to feel like I could talk about it, feel like I can build with it. And ultimately that ended up showing when I had a code challenge to build something in Laravel. But I don't want to get ahead of myself because I kind of want to talk through the bullet points that I made here and talk about the whole experience of applying for work in the last few months and, working for the last couple months. I did start applying at a strange time. Right around November is when I started putting out some feelers. It's not a good time to apply, especially where I'm applying for mostly like US jobs, and everybody knows that the holiday season is probably the worst time to start sending out, applications and resumes to potential jobs, because most people are taking time off. Most people are getting into the holiday season, and there's not much hiring that happens between, the last bit of the year and even the first few weeks of the new year. Usually like hiring will start happening like towards the end or middle of January, but not a lot happens between November and December because there's so many people out of office and so many people taking vacation that you usually don't really want to apply for jobs at that point. But I figured I'd start putting out some feelers and see if I got any leads, if I got any responses from anyone. And that's what I did. Of course, the first thing I did was fix up my resume and try to get everything looking good. I have a split in my personal websites. I have my personal website, which is my first name, last name, which I've usually and mostly used as my professional portfolio, because, when I apply for jobs, I don't apply as Dorian Develops. I apply as Dorian Dominguez because that is my name and I have that domain name. So that's where I had my portfolio, which is super outdated. I honestly don't like how it looks and didn't want to push that out to potential jobs because it looks crappy, and I think that it doesn't reflect as well with my experience now, because the last time I updated it was like 3 years ago or something like that. But I did build out DorianDevelops.com, which was more for like content and trying to market some of my one-on-one calls that I was doing, and talk about like my social media presence, right? Like it has a lot of my social media links. It had like some blog posts on there that were basically YouTube videos that were converted over. And basically what I'm trying to say is that I kind of had two online presences of myself, and I wasn't sure like which one to clean up and which one to push out to potential employers. I often feel a little worried when I try to apply for jobs and they find out I do YouTube, or they find out that, I got a following on Twitter, and I like to keep those things separated. But what I decided to do was to use my DorianDevelops.com because it just looked nicer, and I took off some of the social media stuff. Like I think I took off the one-on-one calls. I also took off the blog posts that were from YouTube videos, and then I added like a portfolio work experience section, which I kind of took out some of the stuff from my personal website and put it on there so I can show some of my work history or like things that I've worked on there. And that's the one that I eventually started using. And I went on LinkedIn, I went on Indeed, I went on Dice, I went on all the job board websites, and I started like spamming different jobs. I had multiple resumes like set up for just my defaults. I had like a full stack resume because I have full stack experience. I had a front end developer resume, and then I had a tech evangelist or a developer advocate resume because I was playing around with the idea of potentially doing that job because of the fact that I do YouTube, because of the fact that I make content and know how to talk about software and could do tutorials if I wanted to. I figured, well, maybe I'll put out some feelers for those kind of jobs too, because that's a potential job that would give me the flexibility that I was looking for to be able to work and keep traveling. I do want to mention that was another big thing too. I mentioned that I wanted to work in a completely different stack, but I also wanted to get a fully remote job that would allow me to travel, which made it even harder. So I start spamming my resume on LinkedIn mostly, right? Doing quick applies and actually like filling out applications. And I was getting ghosted. I was getting no responses. I got some, automated rejection emails and didn't really get any interviews at all. I feel like I should check to see if I can actually find the stats, but I think I probably applied to like 100 jobs. I was applying to jobs that weren't in the US. I was applying to jobs that were, completely remote. I was applying to jobs that were developer advocates or tech evangelists. What's funny is that I actually got one interview from Motorola that was for a tech evangelist role, which was just grossly mislabeled. And after talking with human resources, actually getting that first interview and finding out that it was more of a It was something for a camera system that they have, and it would be like going to conventions and talking about the camera for Motorola security or whatever. And I ended up not getting that job, and for obvious reasons, but nothing really came of anything from applying at those big job boards. I think LinkedIn is garbage. I think that a lot of the jobs on there are fake. I think that there's a lot of like AI and bots that apply for jobs on LinkedIn. And if someone posts a job on LinkedIn, I'm assuming that they're just getting flooded with applications. And I don't know if there's a trick to maybe being early to apply and getting in there, but I didn't get anything from LinkedIn for all the jobs that I applied for. So then I did a few things after that. I decided to kind of turn to social media, right? I know that people get jobs through Twitter or X, and I also decided to check out some more like niche job boards. I reached out on social media and posted, on Twitter, like, hey, I'm looking for a job. I tried to spam that a bit and see if I got some responses, and I did, which surprisingly enough, I got a couple interviews from that. And one interview went well, and they were just looking for someone who was more back end than front end. And I was left with we'll let you know when we're hiring a front end person. But that interview did go well, and that was from Twitter as well. There was a couple other jobs that I had originally applied for on LinkedIn that people reached out to me on Twitter, not knowing that I had applied on LinkedIn, and then they referred me to bump me up to kind of get an interview. One didn't go anywhere, and I didn't get an interview, but another one did, and I ended up having a first round interview with them and then getting a code challenge. I felt that the first round interview went well enough for them to give me a code challenge, but I think that the code challenge portion wasn't the best. Again, this was a Laravel Vue.js job, and there was no direction besides like some really vague README that just was like a couple lines of like, build this thing. And they didn't really give you much like of what their expectations or requirements were for the thing that they wanted you to build. And I spent a few hours working on that, and I submitted it, and then I ended up getting rejected with a list of bullet points of all the things I should have done, but none of those things were addressed in that README. So I feel that it was kind of like them being nice enough to give me the challenge, but also leave it extremely open-ended because the lack of requirements to kind of reject you based off of anything they want because you didn't follow things that they didn't mention you to do. But nonetheless, I didn't get that job. And then when I turned to the niche job boards, I went on Larajobs, right? Because they post Laravel jobs. And then I also decided to start looking at startups because oftentimes startups are more flexible with remote work, they're more flexible with schedules, and they don't really care as much of like when you work as long as you're getting stuff done. And I found a website called Wellfund. I did get a few initial screening emails, and I did get a kind of like an email interview, which raised a few red flags. And after filling out like a couple questionnaires and having some correspondence with the CEO from this startup, all the red flags were like, they were asking me if I would work for less money because they asked for salary expectations in the questionnaire, and they said that my salary expectations were high, so they asked if I was flexible on that. They asked a few other things about like, would you be willing to do part-time even though the job was more like posted for full-time, and just it was kind of like I kind of know red flags when I see them, but I was just like, whatever, I'll see where this goes. And then they gave me a code challenge, which was, I see Reddit posts where people talk about like these ridiculous code challenges where they're asking you to like basically spend a day or two building something like really big, which that's exactly what this was. It wasn't, a little feature or, spin up a quick application and build a couple little things to show what you know. It was like build a full, blown application with Laravel, which, Laravel's fairly easy to spin up an application with, but like they wanted all kinds of different features in it. They wanted me to also add things like roles and permissions and then render different UIs and other things based off of permissions and like have different navigational items based off of roles and display different data for different roles. And it felt like when I went through the whole thing, I even tossed it in ChatGPT or Claude, and I was just like, how long should this take like the average developer? Because I was just like, this feels like very big for a small coding assessment. And even ChatGPT was, like this is quite large for a small coding assessment. So I ended up ghosting that one completely just because of the red flags from the get-go, trying to lowball me on the salary before even getting the job, and also then just giving me a ridiculous coding challenge that it felt like they already weren't going to be considerate of my time, and it felt like a waste of time. I didn't want to deal with it. I felt like I had some other jobs that felt better than that, and I was just like, I already had enough interviews with other jobs to know that I wasn't that desperate to spend the whole day building something out for a potential job that wants to pay me part-time and lower than what I'm willing to work for. So I let that one go. And I know it sounds like I'm being picky in the worst job market ever, but I just know my worth, and I could tell that wouldn't be a good company to work for. In the meantime, I had applied for other jobs, and I found a job on Larajobs, which is a Laravel job board, and the job just kind of fit my resume pretty well. They were looking for someone who was full stack, but more focused on front end. They were looking for someone with design chops, but was a developer. And it ticked a lot of boxes off of my resume. It was one of those cases where my resume almost lined up perfectly with it. I didn't need to tailor it too much because it was what my experience has been as a developer and having some experience with design. And I had a few interviews with them, and they went really well. It seemed like a company that appreciated their developers. They were very transparent, and they gave me the opportunity to complete a coding challenge. Now, I will say that this is one of the best experiences I've ever had with a code challenge as someone applying for jobs. They paid me for the 4 hours of the challenge. It was timed, and they basically made the repo public at the time that we agreed upon, and they made it private at the end of the 4-hour time slot, and they paid me $50 an hour to do this challenge. So they paid me $200. It was different from other code challenges, right? Because sometimes you get a code challenge and it's very vague, like the one that I had, and they tell you spend a few hours on it, but of course you feel like you really want to do well, so you'll spend extra time. Many other times you can overdo it because you have so much time, and then you spend a lot of time on it, where this was different because since it was timed, it was a little bit of added pressure, but it was also you can only get so much done in that amount of time. And their directions were very, very clear. They wanted me to build out 3 features, and they wanted me to kind of focus on getting each feature working before moving on to the next one. And they gave a very clear README. They had a good doc that showed everything that they were expecting with images of what the UI should look like, what the functionality expectations were. And I basically had to build out these 3 features, spin up a Laravel application, and do it all with Vue and Inertia. And, they gave me some flexibility on third-party libraries if I chose to do that. And it was really good. And I was very excited for this job, obviously, because there was a lot of green flags that were being waved because of the interview process, because of the fact that they were full remote, because of the fact that they were, a good experience to interview with, a good vibe that I was getting from the developers that ran it, the founders of this agency. It is agency work, which is new to me, but they seem like a good company to work for is basically what I'm trying to say. And the interview process was very well set up, and very good experience as a developer going through this interview process. Sorry, I'm glancing at my notes to make sure I didn't miss anything else because I'm kind of trying to talk about this. Ultimately, I did well. Of course, I was nervous. In that 4-hour period, I tried to do as much as I could. I got all the features I could get done, and I was worried that I didn't do well enough, but then we followed up, an offer came in, and I got that job, and I've been working there for the last month and a half, almost 2 months now, and I recently just got a raise. I tried to negotiate the salary when I first signed up, and they gave me the salary. They were transparent about the range, and we landed like right in the middle. I don't want to disclose too much information, but it was U.S. wages. It was fairly good money for the most part, and they kind of landed right in the middle at the initial setup of the contract. Since I'm traveling, we're doing contract work because they were only offering like full-time to US based developers, and I want to keep traveling, so I couldn't commit to that. So I went the contract route, and they just messaged me, the two co-founders messaged me yesterday and told me that they're very happy with the way I'm performing. There was going to be a 3-month evaluation to see how I was doing as part of the contract, and they've decided that they want to pay me at the top of the scale rather than keep me at what I was at right in the middle, and to just show that they're happy with me and to like stick to their word of compensating me for my efforts and my output. Like I said, they had a lot of green flags, and one of them was that they wanted to make sure that people were paid and happy, and they've proved that to me. So they gave me quite a big pay bump. It was like a $15 an hour raise on top of what I was already making. You don't often get $15 an hour raises, especially after a couple months. So needless to say, like, I'm really happy with the job. I'm really happy with how things are going. I know that this is probably a strange update because there was a lot of videos about me like leaving the rat race and whatnot, but I wanted to make this video to kind of spread a little bit of positivity because there's so much doom and gloom out there when it comes to getting a job as a developer. And I've seen videos. There was one where the guy's like, I wasted my life being a developer, and like he can't get a job. And I don't know the quality of their work. I'm not saying he's a bad dev. I don't know the guy, but I don't know how many of the people that post online are as developers. I can't gauge someone from a Reddit post. I can't gauge someone from a YouTube post. Maybe I got lucky, like I said, I used my network, which some people don't have that because they just don't, right? Like I have a following, and that led me to a few interviews, but ultimately the job that I got, my social media had nothing to do with it. My following had nothing to do with it. I've also had some more jobs follow up recently, because when it rains, it pours. And I've had potential opportunities to maybe, try a DevRel job. I was chatting with someone who runs not a coding boot camp, but like an online learning platform, but the pay just wasn't there, especially like I have this job now that pays really well and I'm pretty happy with it. I'm working in a tech stack that I want to be working with, and they give me all the flexibility that I need to work, from Thailand and the hours that I want. So, I digress. I don't mean to, but what I'm trying to say is that you can't take everything you see on the internet as 100% true to be the case, right? Yes, the job market is not good right now. Yes, this video does not apply to super junior developers who are just getting started because it's probably going to be harder for you to get a job. But I see so many posts about experienced developers who can't land jobs, and I just wanted to put one out there for anyone who might be applying for work and trying to find a job and having a hard time and feeling like they're not going to get a job, because I was stressing. I was legit really concerned because of the fact that I want all this flexibility and I want to be able to keep traveling, and I can't commit to US time zones because I'd be working a graveyard shift essentially if I had to work US time zones where I'm at in Asia right now. So just like keep applying, keep looking. I did tailor my resumes to certain jobs. I tweaked them a bit. I used ChatGPT to help me with cover letters, but I made sure that I didn't just copy and paste the ChatGPT cover letters directly in there. I always used it as a starting point. I basically had it check my resume and then check the job description and then kind of, structure out a cover letter that kind of matched my resume to what their expectations were and what the job requirements were. And then I tweaked it and made sure that it didn't sound like ChatGPT wrote it, but I used the tools at my disposal to try to help me get the job. And I just kept applying. And then eventually I started getting some interviews. I started getting some emails. I started getting some phone calls, and I went through the process, and it's super stressful. Every interview was stressful. There was times I was waking up at 4 a.m. because these jobs were in the US, and I didn't want to give them the idea that I wouldn't be available. So I had interviews where I was waking up at like 3. One of them I woke up at 3:30, and I was online at 4 ready to go for the interview, and I did what I had to do to get the job. And it was a process. Interviewing sucks. It's never fun, but there's jobs out there. I will say that the big job boards suck. Reach out to your network. Look for like niche websites for the tech stack that you have. There's a lot of like websites that have jobs posted about the specific technology that they're looking for, and that might be a better way to go. Reach out to recruiters and reach out to companies directly to kind of bypass those LinkedIn filters and all the spam that they probably get on there, because it must be a mess for companies having to deal with all the AI and bots that probably just auto apply to everything. But that's pretty much it. I feel like this is getting long-winded. I just wanted to share my recent experience to maybe give people a glimmer of hope in the worst job market ever, because I was able to land my dream job working in my dream tech stack, full remote, completely flexible hours, and really good pay. And yeah, that's pretty much it. All right. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.